Hey everyone, Walter Crosby with Helix Sales Development, your host of Sales and Cigars. Today's episode, my guest is Nick Hutchison. Nick has a cool sales story that how he went from being a jock in a high school and not really being interested in books and reading, and running a business and an agency now that's all about books and podcasts, and he's following his passion, his dream. He's interviewed some people that we've read their books: Russell Brunson, Michael Gerber, Grant Cardone, right? Some really some big names that he's engaged with. His podcast is really interesting. We have a great conversation. So if you're interested in books, if you're interested in podcasts, go grab a cocktail, grab a cigar, strap in for another exciting episode of Sales and Cigars. Thanks. I appreciate you taking some time out of your busy schedule to jump on the podcast with me.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here, Walter. Can I throw a curveball in and ask you the first question today?
I am not surprised, but go ahead.
What's the best book that you read in 2023? I see so many amazing books behind you, so what comes to mind?
But that's like an impossible question to answer, Nick. I mean, there's so many of them. I'll answer it this way. It's a book that I reread and reread every year, if not twice. And it's you can see it up at the top above my head next to the football helmet.
Is it Meditations?
By Marcus. Well, Marcus Aurelius never intended it to be published. It was just his journals. But there's so much value. There's so many nuggets in there that it's the book that I go back to. There's so many things that I try to read every day or listen to a book. So I don't know. I probably didn't give you the answer you're looking for, but.
Oh, yes, you did. Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, a journal that was never intended to be read by anybody else, but has impacted the lives of millions. And I'm a big fan of Marcus Aurelius. I always joke with my wife. I'm like, when we have a son, his name should be Marcus Aurelius Hutchison, because I stand for everything that Marcus does, and I'm a big fan of Stoic philosophy myself. It's such an actionable philosophy. So you chose a good book.
It helps you live a life, right? I'm also, I know your relationship with Ryan Holiday. I get the Daily Stoic delivered to my inbox every morning at 5:11, roughly. And I can tell you that's the first thing I read that is digital, and I can go to my inbox, search that out, read that, and then shut it off because it makes me think. And the other day, there's just like chaos, like life, right? Just as chaos. And what he wrote in that edition on Monday was just like, yes, that is exactly what I needed to hear. I know it, but sometimes you just need to be reminded and have it hit you right between the eyes. And I think it's that is a great tool, that a value that he offers to people at really no cost.
Yeah, I think so too. I was gifted a copy of the Daily Stoic by my friend Alec way back in the day, maybe 2018. And the plan was for us to each read the passage separately and then hang out on the phone for a couple of minutes and talk about it every day. And he didn't keep up his end of the bargain. He didn't read the book, but I did. And I read it year after year after year for a couple of years in a row until there were pages falling out of my copy of the Daily Stoic. And now I have a couple more copies. I'm not reading it actively right now, but Stoic philosophy is truly amazing. And I had a chance to visit both Athens, which is where Stoicism originated, and Rome, and walk those streets and feel the energy. And it's just it holds such a special place in my heart as well.
I mean, could you feel something different walking around those ancient areas? Was that real?
I think so, yes. I am somebody who, what's the way to say this without getting too woo-woo? I feel it, the energy of those places. I remember the first time I ever visited a place that sort of knocked me right in the head was Machu Picchu down in South America. And I did a little quick meditation on the side of a mountain outside of Machu Picchu. And I was like, I could feel the energy. I don't know what it is. And I think those ancient places carry something similar.
But there's so many of them that there's a connection there. And without getting woo-woo, as you said, I think all of those places were built for a reason on the location that they're built. What that reason is, I don't know. Somebody felt something. There was some kind of energy going. There was something happening that drew those people there. And if it was happening 3,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago, whatever, I think it's still there. So I'm just kind of curious as if you could pick up on it. You got to be open to it. You can't be on your phone walking around those places and not paying attention. You got to be open.
Yeah, 1,000%. And, the idea that Marcus Aurelius walked those same streets almost 2,000 years ago, whatever it was, 1,700 years ago, that's really cool for me, just to feel that energy as you're walking through Rome and imagine what it must have been like. I mean, I get a real kick out of that.
Thanks for being part of another fun episode of Sales and Cigars. Let me ask you a question. Are you tired of struggling to hire sales talent that's going to move the needle for your company? Well, maybe you should attend my Sales Hiring Secrets program and discover the number one mistake that business owners are making with hiring sales talent in their organization. The details are in the show notes. Click on the page. It gives you all the details. It gives you everything you need to know to solve the problem of sales talent on your team. Thanks. Yeah, that's not to minimize it, but it's a cool experience that I think there's not enough Americans who have a passport that go and explore places because we're so big and expansive here. There's a lot to explore here, but going there, like what's old in Greece is a little different than what's old here in the States, right? Boston, there's some old stuff in Boston, but it's nothing compared to England, Italy, Greece, Egypt, Mesopotamia, Syria, Iraq. I mean, all those places got a little bit on us on history. We may have come a little farther, but we've also may have fallen backwards a little bit too. Not to get political.
Well, you're not wrong. And yeah, Boston was founded in the 1600s, which seems like so long ago, but then you think of the Acropolis and Athens, and you get to go tour it, and you realize, well, that's 2,500 years old. And I haven't visited the pyramids or anything like that yet, but I can't. And there's a lot of dispute around when those were even built in the first place, but thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago. It is crazy. But anyway, thank you for indulging my curiosity on the book question.
Well, that's the cool thing about podcasting is that you think you got a plan, but then you go this way. And my role has always been for when I started this was for me to meet interesting people, have conversations that provided some value, and for me to have a good time. So we're off to a good start, I think, for everybody. So now let's answer the question. Is there a book that's important to you that you, from an entrepreneurial point of view, and I know there's a little irony here with what you do, and we're going to get into that, but if you got a business owner who's had success and is striving for that next level, right? 5 to 10 million or 10 to 20 million. And they've got a good product, but they're just missing some of the components and they want to get there. Is there something that you would say you should read one or two of these books? There's probably 100.
Well, just like you, I love the foundational old school business books like The E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber, but I'll take it in a different direction. One of the best business books that I've ever read came out a couple of years ago, and that's $100 Million Offers by Alex Hormozy. Now, he's recently released a newer book, $100 Million Leads, but I think the offer creation book is amazing. Alex Hormozy, he's been a guest on our show before, and what I think is special about Alex is that he writes about these very complex business subjects at a 3rd to maybe 5th grade reading level. And he's able to simplify those very complex ideas by going through the book 15, 16, 17 different revisions, just trying to simplify the information, because I think the simpler it is, the easier it is to implement. And so the first time I went through $100 million offers, I just rearranged some of the offer structures in my own service business, and a huge boost to revenue almost immediately without offering anything different, just changing the way that I offered. And it's those little tweaks, it's those little 1% improvements that can have a massive downstream effect a couple of years after implementing them. And so I'm a really big fan of Alex's work. And so I'd recommend that anybody out there take a look at $100 million Offers and $100 Million Leads by Alex Hormozy.
Yeah, I agree. I was at the launch that he did for the Leads book. I picked up a few extra copies of that, but he has one concept that if you're going to read the book or you're going to listen to the book, and I never really thought about this until a year or so ago when I heard him say it. Listen to the book with the book in your hands in front of you, right? So you've got two senses, occurring at the same time, so more of it lands. But I remember walking around the city of Lexington early one morning. I was just exercising and walking, right? That's what I do. And I was listening to $100 Million Offers. And I'm walking down the street, making sure I didn't bump into buildings and cars, listening to it. And I could comprehend what he was saying. Not the smartest guy in the world, but he had broken it down to such simple pieces and simple steps. And that's because he's gone through and done all of those things and iterated on mistakes and cleaned it up and went back and tried it. And, his idea of 100 days spending, the same amount of money every day for 100 days, that's how you learn and test something, he's brilliant. And people think he's a genius because of what he's done in the last couple of years, but it's really what he's done with all those failures before that's led to this. So that's another great, that one never pops into my head, but that's a great, release there. So let's talk. I mean, you're in the book business. You're in your podcast business. So help the audience understand, if you would, what Book Thinkers is all about. And we can talk a little bit about your podcast, because you got some pretty powerful, impressive people that you've worked with.
So Book Thinkers, my agency, helps nonfiction authors promote and market their books. So we'll help an author once their book is finished. We'll help them get it all over social media. We'll help them create short-form video content to build their platform. We'll help them get booked on podcasts. I love helping authors get their books into the hands of the right readers, because I believe the right book at the right time can change somebody's life. Now, as I started to build my community on social media, by providing book recommendations years and years and years ago, before the business was really even monetized, and I'm happy to tell that story after, I noticed that some of my favorite authors, they were reposting my book reviews, they were following my account, they were engaging in some way, shape, or form. And I had a mentor of mine say, Nick, you should start a podcast, because I bet the people in your audience would tune in. They're reading these same books. They have follow-up questions. You have follow-up questions, but you actually have access to these authors. So you should go out and interview them, record the conversations, upload them, let your community get involved. And I said, okay, let me try that out. And now we've hosted a boatload of interviews, and I've had a chance to interview some of my all-time favorite authors. You've referenced a couple of them already, including Michael Gerber, who wrote The E-Myth Revisited and a bunch of other books. We've talked a little bit about Ryan Holiday, he's also written The Daily Stoic, but a ton of other books. And I love working with these people to help them share their message, because books have helped me become healthier, wealthier, happier. And I know they could do the same for just about anybody I come in contact with. I think there's a book to solve every single problem that we face as human beings. And so that's a little bit about my business. Again, we're helping authors promote books. But then on the reader side, we have a podcast. We have a large social media following where we provide book recommendations. And it's all centered around that idea that the right book at the right time can change somebody's life.
But how did you get to that? You're absolutely right. Books can change people's lives. There's something out there. You're too young to have gone to the library when you were 6 years old with mom to go check out books or look at the books in there. So how the hell did you get to the books? Like, what was the vehicle?
Here's my story. I was not much of a reader growing up. I was more of the athlete stereotype, right? Not really much of the academic. So I played football in high school. We went to the Super Bowl in Gillette Stadium. That was a fun story. I was captain of the wrestling team, and you couldn't pay me to do my homework. And that attitude, that behavior continued through most of my college experience as well. You'd find me in the dining hall. You'd find me hanging out with my friends, but not really in the classroom. And I took an internship going into my senior year at a local software company. It was a sales internship. And my boss at the time, Kyle, he recognized some unfulfilled potential. That's a nice way of putting it. I was sort of a know-it-all, kind of cocky, arrogant 20-year-old. And he said, listen, man, you're commuting an hour each way to this internship over the summer, 5 days a week. That's 10 hours a week in the car. He said, listening to the same song, the same playlist, the same radio station for the 500th time, it's not going to get you closer to where you want to be in life. But the right podcast might. And so he recommended a couple of shows where a successful host would interview a series of successful guests, and they would share what they had done to become successful. And very quickly, given the volume of shows that I was consuming, very quickly I realized that so many of these successful people, they were giving credit to the books that they had read. And that's where the success was coming from. And I heard the same titles over and over and over again. Like, we know a lot of the classics: How to Win Friends and Influence People, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, The E-Myth Revisited, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Think and Grow Rich, and on and on and on. And I just realized, like, if all of these successful people are doing that, and I'm not doing that, because reading's not cool, like, then I'm choosing to live under my potential. So I went to my local Barnes & Noble one day. I grabbed about 10 books, which was a lot of money for me to spend at the time as a broke college kid. And the rest is history. I've been reading 50 to 100 books a year ever since.
You've reached out, like, one of the people that you've interviewed, one of the people that you're connected to is Russell Brunson, who has a program that's helping us get back to some of those classics that we didn't even know were classics. There's some authors that he's laying out there that's like I had never heard of, but the concepts are clean, simple, from a perspective that I had never heard or seen before, and some of these women, like, I don't know how they got published, given how screwed up the culture was at that point. Like, they had to do something to fight to get what they wanted. Because even in the 1970s, women couldn't get a loan for a business. It's like, so, I mean, they were some pretty powerful thinkers. So that a manager, somebody from an internship turned you on to a podcast, which turned you on to books. So it was a twofer, right? And it helped you get connected as your job, helped you, advance your career. And probably the biggest piece was you realizing you were living under your potential.
Yep. So from there, I ended up going through my senior year, continuing to read great books. That's when I first discovered Napoleon Hill and a bunch of these people. I graduated and I took a full-time job with that same software company. It was a pretty sweet gig. And I was reading books on sales and marketing. I was applying them to my role, and I was experiencing a lot of financial success at a young age relative to the people that I was around. But despite the success and me giving all of the credit to the books that I was reading, my friends and my family, for the most part, and my coworkers, they didn't want to read these books. And so I turned to social media, and I just started sharing the books that I was reading with the hopes of connecting with like-minded people. And that's how it started. That's where the original momentum came from. I was just like, here's what I'm reading. Here are my takeaways. That way, if somebody asked me about it, I could reference, hey, go check out my Instagram channel. And as the audience grew a lot faster than I expected, authors started to reach out and they'd say, hey, Nick, I love your book reviews. Can I pay you to review my book? I'm like, well, sure. Why not? Getting paid to read sounds like a pretty sweet job, right? So that was the first successful form of monetizing my love for reading, because I had an audience of engaged, followers, and they had a book that needed to be sold. And that's how my agency started, and there were a few failures, along that process. And that's how it all happened.
To me, the people that are, whether it's somebody like Crosby or Brunson, or you, there's a kernel, there's a passion that is the driver, and digging that out is usually the fun part of a conversation. But having that's what drives those entrepreneurs, because it's tough. You screw things up, you fail, you think something's going to be great and it falls apart. You waste a bunch of money on ads and a direction, and you realize it's not wrong. But that's part of learning. And having that drive helps you keep going because you have that passion. And some of the people that you've engaged with, I mean, is that common amongst everybody, from a Crosby to a Brunson to a Bob Smith, who's just wrote a book because he was passionate about some concept that it can help people? I mean, is that a common thread through everybody, or is it unique?
Well, I've seen sort of two buckets here. One is that somebody has a pre-existing passion for something, and then they go ahead and build a business from it because they are passionate, and that is the through line that allows them to overcome additional obstacles and continue to pursue success. So having a pre-existing passion and building a business around it, that is pretty common. I think the other most common path is sort of the inverse, which is that somebody doesn't have a pre-existing passion, but they do have an urge to improve themselves and improve the lives of the people around them. And so they get really good at something. And through that consistency, they start to see some success. And they build a passion as a result of the consistency, which is what happened with me, right? I didn't read growing up. I wasn't into personal development books, but very quickly I went from non-reader to reader because I experienced a lot of success, financial success, as a result of the sales books that I was reading and applying them to my role. So I continued to do more and more and more of it. And then all of a sudden, reading for the sake of reading and implementing information and satisfying curiosity became my passion. It wasn't pre-existing. Like, yes, I might have been really competitive and wanted to live a great life, but the passion came from the consistency, not the other way around. I will say the one major through line that I've seen, having worked with and interviewed a lot of these people that we're talking about, is that there is no such thing as an overnight success. Every single one of them, all of them, have stories that we don't really get to hear. Now, Hormozy's done a great job at highlighting his, right? Sleeping on the gym floor and going broke and all of that, but they all have. Grant Cardone is in his 60s, and in his late 20s, he was in and out of rehab for alcohol. And that story is more common than I think the overnight success is.
But there's, I suppose there are overnight successes, but the thing that pops into my mind is, somebody watches a prize fight with Mayweather, or, go back, I'm old, so I go back to Muhammad Ali, Joe Frazier. Those guys, they weren't overnight successes, and they didn't win, the millions of dollars that they took away because they were in that fight and it lasted 15 minutes or 3 minutes. It's all of the work that nobody sees. It's all of that running. It's all of the ugly stuff that you saw in Rocky with Sylvester Stallone. All of that's what gets people there, and that's what stops people from being successful, is that lack of discipline. So I would say that you being, like, when you were talking about your high school and college days, you were a jock, right? In the the vernacular that my generation uses is, you were that jock that just, were successful on the athletic field, had skills, got confidence, and that was going to carry you through. But there's discipline there, there's consistency there. So that's a thread that helped you, like when you see, like you read a couple of books and you say, oh, look, I applied that and I made more sales and I applied that. So I think that's a piece that is that you pulled from your youth of just being an athlete and being competitive, wanting to get better. I'm curious. I don't need the books, but I'm like what did you apply? Because if you took an internship in sales and then you took a full-time gig in sales, and you're selling software, that's not a walk in the park. So how did you how did you learn sales, and how did you learn that discipline? Because there's discipline within sales to stay with a process and a methodology and ask the right questions and go slow enough and be willing to disqualify people. I'm curious as to how you learned through that.
Well, it started with repetition. It was get my butt in the seat, start dialing for dollars and learning the process. From there, you fail a lot and you become resilient. You expect failure as part of the process. And then you have to reflect on how can you improve? Then you identify opportunities for improvement. You go out and educate yourself. And because you're constantly going through this process, you have something to work from, a base of knowledge and understanding. And so you apply the sales learnings to your role on a day-to-day basis. You try another group of activity, you reflect on it, you identify additional opportunities for education, you go out there and read the books or listen to the podcasts, and then that cycle continues and continues and continues. And I think that the person who succeeds the fastest fails the most and makes the most changes. And so prior to that, when I was earlier in college, I did run my own house painting business for a couple of years, and I had some door-to-door sales experience there. So I think a lot of my early failures happened in the door-to-door sales. Then I moved into this phone sales position, and I was able to bring a lot of value into this business almost on day one, just because I would show up, I would dial, I would learn, I'd iterate, I'd change. And then I moved very quickly into a position where I started to close business. And I had my own territory, and I was flying all around the country making sales presentations. And, I think that, again, I was able to get to that position so fast, so young, because I was learning from the world's best sales teachers, right? Their books are available for $20 each in a few hours of your time. And you just have to be able to delay a little bit of Netflix or a little bit of social media, read and apply these books, and some magic happens. I mean, these names like Brian Tracy and Zig Ziglar, like it didn't take them a couple of days to learn what they've written about in their books. It took them decades. And then they put their greatest life lessons into the book, and you can use it for $20. And then everybody chooses not to. So it wasn't rocket science. It was just showing up and doing the work and using those books.
It comes down to, that's what it comes down to, is doing the work and being willing to have some failure. The dialing for dollars concept is scary for a lot of people. My first job out of college was, I'd make 450 dials a day. And I'm in New York City, so I talked to 5 people, and 3 of those people would hang up on me, right? I mean, but you learned how to get past the gatekeeper. You learned how to get value quickly. They didn't care. Like, if you got a meeting with somebody, it was like, what do you want? Right? They don't even remember it. So it's all of that, be willing to do that and take that learning from the school of hard knocks sometimes. But you were smarter than I was, because you were reading these books and paying attention to these people. That didn't come for me till later. I was just dumb and kept doing the dialing and got lucky early.
Well, I got lucky that my boss at the time, Kyle, recommended the podcasting, which turns into books. Because without that, I would have been just like you.
But did you did Kyle stick with you through that? Was that a manager? Was that a mentor to you during the time there?
Yeah, Kyle was the director of sales. And so it was a small software office, in New Hampshire. And so I'd see Kyle every day. I mean, here's the fun story. I don't really talk about this very much, but I run my house painting business for 2 summers. And there are a handful of other students at my university who were also selected to sort of run their own business. And you get a little bit of sales training, they give you some coaching, they take care of liability insurance and workers' comp, and then you go out there and do the work. And I was the lowest performer both summers out of the handful of students at the school that ran their own businesses. And I realized, I have a lot more to learn in order to be successful. I'm the worst performer out of these students. I'd like to go work for another business. So I'm at a school career fair, and I'm walking around with one of my friends that's a computer programmer. And I'm not. I'm a sales guy. I'm a business guy. And he's talking to this software company at their booth, and I'm just kind of standing off to the side, waiting until he's done so we can continue walking around. And this guy sitting next to me, who's also off to the side, just strikes up a conversation. And, hey, who are you? What experience do you have? Why are you at the career fair? What are you looking for? And at the end of the conversation, he goes, just so you know, I actually own that company over there, and I'm just here to observe how my staff is operating at the booth. And he said, we're not here to hire a sales guy, but you're hired. How much do you want? And I was like, and I just kind of spit out some numbers per hour. And I was like, I want commission and growth opportunities. I didn't know what I was talking about. I had never worked for anybody before. And he's like, yeah, he knew that. And he's like, well, you're hired. You're going to work for this guy, Kyle. He's the director of sales. He's going to tell you what to do. You'll have some marketing responsibilities with this woman, Karen. She's the director of marketing. Just come in later this week. HR will take care of the paperwork, and you'll start once the summer starts. And Kyle wanted nothing to do with me. He didn't hire me. The owner of the business did. He didn't want a sales intern. So they gave me my own office, which was really rare because there were dozens of employees that had been there for a long time that still worked in cubicles, kind of in open space. But they didn't have any room for me in one of those rooms, so they just kicked me into my own office. So Kyle, he was rough with me in the beginning, which was amazing. But he did stick with me and became a mentor of sorts. If you've ever seen the show Suits, sort of like that relationship between Harvey and Mike Ross in the beginning. He's rough, but he's teaching because he knew that there was some potential. And so that's kind of what it was like for me. And ultimately, upon graduation, I was given a lot more responsibility. I became Kyle's sort of partner with a few other people on the team. And then ultimately, Kyle moved on, and I took the director of sales position before Book Thinkers, was my full-time thing.
That's a great story. And the funny thing is that most people that are in sales and have had success have a story that's not unlike what you said. They're just standing there. They end up in a conversation. They don't know who they're talking to. And then something like that happens, right? And it's not necessarily that exact story, but it's weird. My daughter is graduating college, and she went to, she's into equine management. So she's doing some social media work for some lady that owns a bunch of horses. So she was taking photos. So she made it her business to try to make some networking. So she went over, she was looking at some saddles, and there's a gentleman that was, turns out he was a rather high level guy with the saddle company. And she struck up a conversation, and he's like, when are you graduating? What are you looking to do? And, she's on her 4th interview with this outfit. And it's it's a perfect situation for a sales job. But it's because of the conversation that is initiated, and you act like an adult, and you show who you are because there's no pressure. And that makes it easier for a guy that owns a company to realize that you had no idea who he was and what he was doing, and you were just you, and he saw something. That's a great story.
Yeah, if I didn't bump into him, I wouldn't be having this conversation because I wouldn't have been introduced to books, and I wouldn't have interviewed those guys like Russell and Michael Gerber, and then I wouldn't have written my own book, and I wouldn't have been, looking for podcast opportunities. And so it all goes back to that day where I decided to go to the career fair. It really does.
Yeah. What do the Stoics call that? It's not fate. What's those?
Amorpha T,
Yes. Thank you.
the love of one's fate. Yeah.
Yeah. It is it's one of those concepts that you have to embrace when it happens and recognize it.
I actually got an Amorpha T tattoo on my right bicep when I was in Rome to sort of memorialize that whole experience. And what's funny about that concept of like a love of one's fate is basically the Stoics say like nothing is inherently good or bad, but you should view it as good. Even the bad stuff, you should view it as good. And when I went to get that tattoo, I sort of got scammed a little bit. It tested my patience quite a bit. They said one amount online. I show up, they say another amount. The guy kind of cracks like a little smile. They're talking in Italian. I'm like, I should walk out of this room. But I'm like, oh, I'm being tested. Like I'm getting a tattoo about viewing this circumstance as positive, yet I'm reacting negatively to things that maybe I'm just perceiving. Maybe I'm the one that's wrong and I'm making assumptions here. So I got the tattoo, and it's just like a funny reminder of that whole concept.
But those are the little things that keep us on the straight and narrow, and that's and we need those reminders from time to time. And it doesn't always have to be a tattoo, although I have one of those that reminds me of a certain situation. So this was a great conversation. I knew we were gonna go some places that I didn't anticipate. But could you share quickly there's people out there that should write a book. There's people out there that have a book in them, just don't realize it. How, when they get the book done, you can help them. Or if they're thinking about doing podcasts, can you share who your ideal customer is and how would they self-identify?
My ideal customer has written or is in the process of writing a nonfiction, business, or personal development style book that will be used as a lead mechanism, a business card for some type of higher ticket complementary product or service. Like it's the first step in Russell's value ladder, right? So if that book leads to coaching or consulting or speaking or online courses or some type of business, then you're a good fit for me. I can really help you generate additional leads for your business by helping you promote and market your book more efficiently. And if that person is in your audience and they'd like to get in touch with me, they can go to bookthinkers.com, which I'm sure you'll throw down in the show notes, and you could set up a discovery call with somebody on our team to learn more.
Awesome. Let me ask a clarifying question. Are you doing the funnels? Or are you just doing the promotion piece of it?
We specialize in organic traffic that then goes to the funnel. So we do have a couple of referral partners that help with the funnel building. We're not, our ideal client has the funnel built out already. We're just driving organic traffic to it and building their social media brand.
Got it. So that's helpful. So we're gonna have this. The best way to reach you is there to go to the website and then book a discovery call, and it'll launch from there. I definitely encourage people to go look at the website. There's some cool photos on there. There's some cool I've never seen that image of Michael Gerber before. Like he's not as buttoned up as I've seen in when I've seen him in person. I actually have a copy of one of my copies. It's not in my pile. It's in the house tucked away, but he signed it just because it's not out here with all of my other stuff. But I have that is the book I recommend to people on a regular. If they haven't read it, they got to read it. Last question. Past or present, any relationship with cigars?
Yeah, the only time that I was really into cigars was when I ran my house painting business in college, and I had a couple of guys that worked for me that loved to smoke cigars, while they were painting houses. And so whenever I'd stop on the job site, I'd participate. And, I've had some cool cigar shop experiences as well, all over the place as a traveling salesperson in my prior life. Not something that I do regularly right now, but I definitely have fond memories of hanging out with the guys and, up on a ladder trying to smoke a cigar with a paintbrush in the other hand. And, that was pretty common for us back in the day.
That's can be a little complicated on certain types of days. But the cool thing about a cigar lounge is you never know who you're going to run into while you're there. And there's always characters in a cigar lounge. And I seek that out when I go someplace. I'm always looking for that. Not the one that's the fancy one, but the one that's the local one, where you get the neighborhood characters, and it's always fun. Nick, I appreciate your time. This was a lot of fun. We'll promote the hell out of this to help your business and get the word out. Thank you.
Thank you.